Once you have that document in your download bar, use your Cami shortcut to open a Cami tab, drag and drop. Should not be prompted to select any pre-existing version this time. And complete the notes as we go. No Pear Deck today. So in this module, we will look at the controversial issue of socialization and gender. A big part of that is the debate about whether gender has biological or social origins, or some mix of the two. So you should be able to explain where the debate currently stands. This is a pretty rapidly changing debate. Every semester I teach it, there's new stuff to incorporate, changes to make. You should be able to understand different conceptualizations of gender as either something that is fixed or changeable, in other words, fluid. And you should be able to form your own position within this debate and defend your thinking about it. This is another nature versus nurture class, just as the same as we kicked off socialization in general. And as we get into it, understand that we need to distinguish between sex and gender. Sex is biological only, whereas gender is all of the social baggage that goes along with those biological differences. Start with an overview of the two different positions. The nature side, the side that tells us that gender is basically something we're born with, says that gender, like sex, is determined by biology. Right? So, if you are male, you will be a boy and then you will be a man. If you are a female, you will be a girl and then you will be a woman. It's biologically determined. In other words, gender quite naturally matches our sex. And the different genders. Boys, girls, men, women are inherently, innately, instinctively predisposed to certain differences in terms of their personalities, the things in which they are interested, and also their abilities, right? The stuff that they are good at doing. There are possible mismatches between a person's sex and their gender. The nature side does not deny that those exist, but they tell us those are also influenced by biology. Or a conscious choice, because the nature side is aware that we're not talking about amoebas or rabbits or even apes. We're talking about human beings, and human beings can make a choice. If Robert decides that Robert wants to become Roberta, right, and be a woman, right, the nature side is not blind to the fact that he can do that, make that choice. He can rationalize it to himself to herself however she wants to, and that's possible. But again, otherwise it's biologically influenced. If for some reason Robert really does feel more like a Roberta than a Robert, there's probably some explanation for that. There are people who are what known as intersex, either because of anatomy, brain chemistry, brain structure, lots of different things, and therefore they may experience a mismatch. An overview of the nurture debate. Nurture side says all of the talk about biological differences between males and females are overblown. Before we even get to talking about gender, those physical sex distinctions are really very narrow. And those are the distinctions you've learned about in health classes. Ovaries versus testes. Right? I'll leave you there. I'll spare you. There's going to be enough discomfort, I think, in this module. We'll just leave it with ovaries and testes. The brains are not different. So we're not going to find personality, interest, ability differences in the brain. Therefore, gender does not come from any differences in the brain. Gender is something we learn. A lot like language. And it may be hard for us to see that it's learned because the distinctions are picked up very early in life. But just because they're picked up really early doesn't mean they aren't something that we're learning, right, rather than born with. Those distinctions that start out small in our earliest days are then exaggerated and reinforced by socialization throughout the course of our lives. Everybody ready to move on from that one? Okay. All right. Now we'll delve more into the details. All right. The nature side. Remember, sexes equal genders in this story. And this is an evolutionary biological explanation for the differentiation between the genders. Because of biology, females are the childbearing and child-rearing part of the human species. Especially in childbearing, there's no dispute about that. Right? Now, Robert can laugh about being Roberta, but in the old Monty Python movie, The Life of Brian, when one of the men in the Judean People's Front wants to become a woman and be known as Loretta and have babies, right, John Cleese's character informs him that he can't have babies. When the man retorts, "Don't tell me I can't have babies," so you can't have babies. You haven't got a womb. Right? What are you going to do? Gestate the fetus in a box? No. So only females can bear children. And they also are uniquely equipped, that's kind of maybe a very mechanical way of putting it, to rear children because they, especially in early human life when there is no infant formula, they are the ones who can breastfeed a child. Right? If you are born a male, breastfeeding a child will accomplish nothing. Right? Also, human females, unlike the females in many other animal species, can become pregnant at any time of year. Whereas some animals are only in estrus, right, or may become pregnant at certain times of year. That's why all of those deers that I have shot were shot during estrus. That's when the bucks are running around fighting each other over access to females to breed, and that's why. And that's why it's called the rut. Human females, though, can become pregnant at any time of year. And our babies that we have are also different to the babies of other animals. Now, not other mammals. Part of being a mammal means that you give live birth. Right? But in contrast to most other mammals, humans have large brains, which means a large noggin, are fed by mammaries. Again, that's not different than mammals. That's why they're called mammaries. And our offspring, and this is in contrast to a lot of other mammals, are slow to develop. And if you guys have ever watched any nature documentaries about the African savanna, when those little baby antelopes and gazelles are born, they fall out of the womb, and they do fall because their mothers are tall and walk around on all fours. And then that baby plops down into the grass, and what does it do? Yeah, it gets up and it starts hopping around. Right? Human baby, much to my disappointment, I really expected that that's what my firstborn was going to do. Right? So when they handed to me, I just dropped him on the hospital floor, and then he didn't get up and start prancing around. And I was really disappointed. And so I just walked out. What's that, Robert?
I'm asking if that's what Chris is.
Oh, that's what happened to... No. Well, no. Chris is all right. Much like Idi Amin and Donald Trump, Chris has a very good brain. Right? Anyway, all joking aside, right, our offspring don't get up and hop around, and I did not drop my son on the floor. He came out with the cord wrapped around his neck 4 times. He looked really like we were worried. All right. All of this is a constraint on females. Because, first off, because the children are large brain, pregnancy is very disruptive to a woman's life. Because she must then feed that baby for really years, right, in this time period, by breastfeeding, she's also less mobile. And even after she no longer has to feed the child, human babies are pretty helpless. Human children are pretty helpless. She's got to take care of them for a long time. And this makes females less mobile than males. And so, as the argument goes, they prioritize being nurturing. So caring for children, but also emphasized social relationships. They tended to work with other women to raise children, right, and conduct food gathering that could be done near to home. So they learned to be cooperative, nurturing, cooperative. And this was true then, and at least for some males today, this is still true. The only thing that is required to be attractive is that a female is young and fertile. That's it. Right? No other important skills or traits are required. All right, and this is where I'll throw in some of my life advice. All right, guys, don't be one of these males. All right? Be picky. Females in this classroom, be even pickier, because it turns out, at least in terms of how the world tends to work, not saying it's correct that it works this way, but the way it tends to work, females still are less mobile in regards to children. Right? If you pick the wrong male, right, and have that male's babies, and that male is a dud, he is going to leave you to care for his babies. Right? And he may not have given you the best kinds of babies. Right? So let's face it, he's a dud. And there are probably other things that made him a dud that he might pass along and make your children duds. So, everybody be picky. Right? Make good babies with good people. Or don't make any babies at all. That choice is yours. All right. Now, these not-so-picky early males need access to mates. And this access depends on, one, being physically strong. Because, remember, this is an evolutionary biology or biological explanation. Right? So just as with the deer that spar, right, and butt heads in order to drive off other males and get access to breeding females, physical strength is important. Right? If you are the weaker male, you lose, and you don't get to make babies. Hunting prowess is also a part of this story for a couple of reasons. One, it suggests that you have skill with weapons. And weapons are something that make human males different from the males of other species. Right? Other species don't really make tools, with a very few exceptions in the higher primates. So, humans make weapons, and if you're good at hunting, you are probably good with weapons. Right? You were good at spearing woolly mammoths, right? Fighting off saber-toothed tigers or dire wolves that tried to take your woolly mammoth away from you. You're also probably good at providing, but we'll get back to that one. And social dominance is important for this. Social dominance also kind of relies on physical strength and being good with weapons, but it's also about personality traits. Right? To be socially dominant, you need to be confident. How many of you know somebody a male that's a very big guy, right? Very powerful guy, could hurt people if he wanted to, but he's what we refer to as a gentle giant? You guys know anybody like that? Maverick, you know somebody like that? Okay, now we're at Bree, you know somebody like that? Yeah, my father-in-law is one of those kinds of guys. I mean, he's just like a big, babies love him. He's just a big teddy bear. But he's also an old farm boy, and he could really do damage if he were so inclined. Right? Now, it doesn't mean he's not confident, but we all know somebody like that. Some big, timid guy, right? Maybe even shy. Whereas somebody else has a lot of confidence, and they end up kind of running the show. Right? That can go along with this. Right? So confidence is important. So is taking risks. For one thing, you don't start a fight with another male over a female unless you are confident that you can win and willing to take the risk of bodily injury to fight with them. And aggression. And the gentle giants might lack the aggression. You need that. You've got to be willing to hurt other males. And so, I mean, so far, all of this may not sound real great, and you got to be cocky, you've got to be risk acceptant, and you need some aggression, but you also need to be like selfish and a little bit lazy. Right? So what happens in this story is you've got a big, tall person like Josh, right? And Josh is like, man, you know, I'm stronger, I'm better with weapons than... Who are we going to pick on for this? Chris. Robert has volunteered you for this, Chris. Now, Josh knows that he's better at all of this stuff than Chris. Right? With those long Josh legs, he could more quickly chase down a woolly mammoth and kill it. But why? Right? Chris, while clearly not as physically impressive, and Chris, just play along with this, we're all kidding. It won't get too bad. Remember, I'm recording this and therefore have to own it. Josh knows that Chris can still kill a woolly mammoth. And so Josh decides to let Chris kill that woolly mammoth. Chris then knows that, Josh then knows once Chris is sitting down there and he's skinned the woolly mammoth and he's cut off the meat and done all of the really hard and gross work, Josh can just run up to Chris on those long, swift legs and kill Chris. Right? And then take his woolly mammoth and his woman while he's at it. Right? And so there's got to be this desire to take things by force rather than by effort. And all of this, right, being physically strong, good at hunting and weapons, having the characteristics that go into being socially dominant, allowed some males to exclude other males from access to breeding females. It was also attractive to early females, right, who would witness these things, including Josh's violence against Chris, and think, wow, what a mate. Right? This person is not only going to be able to fight off other males, but will also be able to provide resources that my babies will need to survive, like food. And it still seems, right, now how many females in here, how many of you would be attracted to a man based on his ability to beat up other men? Okay. Not one of you, right? And I think that's generally true. Women seem to be less impressed by that today than in the past, although there still seem to be some men out there who think that beating up other men is impressive to women, and there still seem to be some females who play along with that too. Okay, now these aggressive, strong males who were good with weapons obtained their place of social dominance. And because of this, they passed along their genes. Right? Weak, timid, risk-fearing, non-dominant men, males, were far less likely to pass along their genes. It doesn't mean they never did, but they were far less likely to. Because these more aggressive, strong, dominant men did pass along their genes, those genes have become the source of the masculinity we see in today's males. Now, that explains where masculinity comes from. It doesn't necessarily give us a whole lot about females. However, females that were, talking in terms of probability, most likely to provide more babies need committed resources from a male. The better fed a female is, the more likely she is to become pregnant and be able to carry the fetus to term and deliver a healthy baby, and then continue to provide for that baby. But in order to have those committed resources, females had to put up with all of these really not very pleasant male traits. And so, females who were successful at living with these men and bearing their children had to balance those traits. They had to counter aggression with low aggression, so as not to end up in perhaps a fatal fight with their male partner. To make decisions based on consensus. Because again, you have to be agreeable. If you're going to live with one of these pretty unpleasant early males, you're going to have to go along to get along in decision making. And because your unpleasant male partner is particularly risk-taking, you have to be cautious. Because if Della's ancient female ancestor is partnered up with one of these risky, aggressive fellas, there's a fair chance that him being confident and risk acceptance, he has a hold my beer moment and gets himself killed doing something stupid. And so Della has to think, well, eventually this guy's going to do something dumb. Right? He's going to try and fight 2 saber-toothed tigers at a time, and he's going to die. So I better stockpile some food, right, and plan for that day when I don't have somebody to provide for me. So the successful Dellas of the past had to be less risky. They also were better off if they had less confidence, because this also helped them to take the kind of cautious actions and avoid aggression that would increase their odds of surviving longer and having more babies. Also have to be more empathetic. Again, this has to do with balancing the unpleasant males they live with. Let's give somebody else a turn at being a long, distant ancestor on the female side of this. Lydia. Lydia, when you were not so pleasant, but big and strong male partner returns to the cave, right? Or the tent, whatever. Not everybody lives in caves. And let's say maybe the fire went out. And it's not so easy to get fire going back in these days. And your male partner seems like his hunt was not successful. He's a little cranky. Right? You use your empathy to decide, this is the time to just encourage him to lay down and take a nap. And wait to tell him after he's woken up that the fire is out. Right? You have to time these things and see things from his perspective so that he doesn't become angry and enraged and maybe hurt you. The females that had these traits that allowed them to live alongside unpleasant males and survive long enough to bear their children then passed along the genes that are the source of today's feminine traits. Where we will leave off here today, because I know for some of you this may sound like a persuasive argument, and for some of you it may sound nonsensical, but the nature side has a really good champion to provide evidence for its cause. That is Genghis Khan. And he is, and it would seem at least Maverick knows him, the famous Mongol conqueror. Conquered this huge land empire. The biggest contiguous land empire there has ever been. That guy had it all going for him. Physical strength, good with weapons, socially dominant, aggressive, confident, risk-taking. And he had a lot of access to females. It is estimated that he has close to 400 million male descendants. And probably roughly the same number of females, but because he doesn't pass along the chromosome, the X chromosome, we can't trace those. We just can't. But we can estimate that he probably has roughly that same number of females. And to put that more in a local context, about 1 in 10 of people in 16 different population groups in Asia are his heirs. Right, so we're talking about places that would have been the Mongols' heartland. So today's Mongolia, for example, right, 1 out of 10 people in a place like that is likely a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. That's how this stuff can be reflected. The dominant men tend to do stuff like this. The first king of Saudi Arabia was trying to think, how in the world am I going to create a state with a modern government with people who will be loyal to me? Right? And then he has a brilliant idea. Well, I'll just have lots of wives, and I'll make lots of sons, and then I'll just plug a son into each of those government posts. And so that's what he did. Had 50 sons or something like that. A lot of kids. Right? Now, those are, of course, extreme examples, but that's how this stuff works. There are also some kind of peculiar things about how family trees tend to collapse in on themselves. No, this is not a story about Arkansas, right, or pick your other stereotypical backwater state. Turns out most people with Western European heritage can also trace their genetics back to Charlemagne, for example. But Genghis Khan is really in a league of his own in terms of this. And again, that's because dominance gave him access to lots and lots of mates. Estimates are that, take this king of Saudi Arabia, all right, you had 50-some sons. Genghis Khan probably directly fathered hundreds of male offspring. How he had time to conquer the world, I don't know. Just kept himself plenty busy. All right, we will stop there with the notes. Okay. Head into your exit slip. It will go live in a little less than 2 minutes.